This is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. The Republican governor of Illinois is working for billionaire businessmen trying to break unions and the middle class. Former Democratic Lieutenant Governor Sheila explains how that happened. President Obama visited a mosque, and former Ambassador Michael Ussery says anti-Muslim rhetoric by some of his fellow Republicans makes things harder for American diplomacy. And conservative radio host Michael Graham talks politics with Peter Ogburn on the Bill Press Show. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Former Democratic Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, Sheila explains how her state has been taken over by a Republican governor operating not on ideology, but on helping his business buddies make more money. And we say hello to Sheila attorney and progressive Democrat, former Lieutenant Governor of Illinois from 2011 to 2015, and currently running for state Senate. Sheila, thanks so much for joining us today on AmericasDemocrats.org.
Well, Jim, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back with you and your listeners.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate your time. Now, a recent article in the New York Times exposed the role of money in running your state of Illinois.
Yeah.
In brief, it says a small group of wealthy businessmen got Republican Governor Bruce Rauner elected, and they're basically running the state on behalf of big business. Is that true? Is that accurate?
It is frighteningly accurate. And I think one of the most important parts of the article was an assertion or a sense from this group of very wealthy folks who were not only from Illinois but from around the country, felt that they were not adequately represented in government. And so they decided to jump in. And you know, I'm appreciative of everyone jumping into the democratic process. I think it works best when we're all working at it. But to for a moment think that the very wealthy are underrepresented does not square with my experience in politics.
Well, you know, you're running for state senate, and of course you've held the second most powerful office in the state. What can you do about this besides just waiting for that next election? I mean, what are things that you can do now to perhaps correct some of these wrongs, if you will?
Yeah, I think actually there's plenty of room to be working as a member, particularly as a member of the Democratic majority in the state Senate. The state Senate has a big Democratic majority, a supermajority, enough to override a veto when necessary. And I think that that until the end of Governor Rauner's term, we'll probably be assessing everything in terms of, is this something that we can override a veto on? So oddly, in that atmosphere of requiring a supermajority, every vote in each of the House and Senate becomes really important. So I want to make sure that Southern Illinois, which is my part of the state where I live and have for a long, long time, is well represented in those discussions.
Now, Governor Rauner is, everywhere you read, very, very unpopular. Is this more proof that money speaks louder than people?
Well, you know, to some extent, yes and no. Elections are always about choices. Our last governor, Governor Quinn, who I served with as lieutenant governor, was not the most popular of people when he ran for re-election. And I think there was some sense of dissatisfaction even among Democrats in a rush to say, well, let's just elect someone else, and without stopping to think about what the someone else would be. It turns out this someone else, Bruce Rauner, is incredibly anti-union. In fact, we have no budget in the state of Illinois. The Constitution requires that the legislature pass a budget by the end of the legislative session at the end of May. They did. He signed only the part of it that dealt with K through 12 schools and vetoed everything else in the budget. Every other funding for mental health treatment, every other funding for whatever was in the middle of being built along the, up and down Illinois, vetoed it all, and it's just been horrible. It's been a horrible way to govern a state.
This sounds, well, especially when you talk about people are just feeling, okay, we want something different after Governor Quinn. We need something different. This sounds a lot like what we're seeing on the national level right now.
Doesn't it? It so much is the looking at, and Donald Trump in particular, who I have to say proves that I'm not a great political prognosticator. I thought after the first debate, well, that's the end of Donald Trump, and no, that was not. And I think it's that same kind of attitude. There's a level of anger among voters, and in many ways that's appropriate. It's appropriate to be angry when we have problems that we do, but it's not enough. It's not enough to say I'm angry, so I'm going to go do something crazy. I think the appropriate response is, I'm angry, and here's how I'm going to do my part in making things better. Here's what I'm paying attention to in terms of who I'm going to be voting for. Not just anyone who fits the blank of being other, but someone who's really going to do the job.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Sheila Simon, former lieutenant governor of Illinois and currently running for state senate in Illinois. Sheila, it really sounds like Governor Rauner is just somewhat of a puppet. And so who are these big money men, and why are so many from out of state?
It's interesting, and I don't know whether the big money convergence just decided to pick Illinois and Bruce Rauner because he was willing to run, or whether Illinois is really the top priority for all these very moneyed people. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that it's sure having an impact. Governor Rauner's anti-union stance is what's really held up us from having a budget. And, of course, it really doesn't have much to do with our state budget. So it's a very interesting issue to pick in an interesting way to try and make it work. We have a strong Democratic majority in our House and Senate, and I think a strong majority of people in the state who understand the importance of union rights, of their abilities to organize, and how that helps families all across the state. And rightfully, we're not going to be giving up those rights, even to get a budget that we very much need. So it's interesting to see that this group of wealthy folks has determined that their need to be able to pay workers less is more important than the state's need for a budget.
And it's interesting we see that same sort of attitude. Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin. I mean, it's happening in two states that you would think unions would never go away. Unions were kind of born and grown in these couple of states, and here they are just being eviscerated.
And it's very sad to see what's going on in Wisconsin. I think in some ways that's been a model for Governor Rauner. The difference is in Wisconsin there was, Republican majorities in their House and Senate, so with a very conservative governor, they could enact some of their ideas. Here, thank goodness, we have Democrats protecting our rights in the House and Senate, and unfortunately, because Governor Rauner has insisted on this anti-union drive, it's resulted in a standstill.
Do you get the feeling that what has happened and is happening in Illinois, is it a Republican blueprint for the rest of the nation, or the billionaires making policy behind the scenes and using those part-time legislators basically to pass the bills that they write?
It could be. If that's the case, I'm really concerned. But certainly there are things that go on that make us look up to Wisconsin and say, wow, yep, that's exactly what they did up there. And it makes us appropriately more passionate about standing up for particularly our right to organize as union members. The way I see it, and the way I think most of Illinois sees it, unions help to make our state strong. We're an attractive state because we have a well-educated workforce, and part of that educated workforce is folks who have really good training through their unions, training on how to be safe in doing incredibly unsafe jobs. Just a whole package of benefits that not only do individual workers get from union membership, but our whole state does. We value that here, and so we're hanging on tight.
So are these efforts by the governor, Rauner, and Walker for that matter, is it less about ideology, more about just killing the unions and reducing the government's role in easing the effects of income inequality?
I think you're absolutely right about that. I think it is not so much ideological as profit driven. That they seem to have a firm belief that if big business can make more of a profit, off of us small workers, then Illinois is going to somehow blossom. I think really the opposite has been the reality, is that as we've had this budget standstill, folks have seen Illinois as a less secure place to start or expand a business, and have been not coming to Illinois, or in fact, in some cases, leaving Illinois. The
greed of a few hurting many.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a new story, but it sure hurts just the same.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now, before we let you go, we have to have you answer this question. We'll see if we can get you to answer this question. Who are you supporting for president?
I am supporting the Democrat who wins the primaries, and very happily, no matter who it will be. How's that?
That was the answer I kind of expected, which was not a bad answer at all. I will say that as well. Sheila Simon, attorney, progressive Democrat, former lieutenant governor of the state of Illinois, currently running for state senate. Sheila, thank you so much for your time with us today. We do look forward to having you back again soon.
That sounds great to me. Great talking with you.
You as well. And this is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going, and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Former Ambassador Michael Ussery, a Republican, offers his take on the 2016 primary campaign and on the harm done to American diplomacy by anti-Muslim rhetoric. More on that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Not only have corporate outrages become commonplace, but the level of the outrages have gone nuclear. Take Martin Shkreli, please. The 32-year-old CEO of Turing Pharmaceuticals launched the drug maker last year, but it doesn't make any drugs. Instead, Shkreli simply bought the rights to a 62-year-old treatment for a disease that can be fatal to unborn babies and patients with HIV and cancer. His only improvement to this life-saving drug was to, quote, enhance the profit he could extract by abruptly raising its price by 5,000%, from $13.50 a pill to $750. Despite public outrage, Shkreli said if given a do-over, I probably would have raised the price higher, as, quote, my investors expect me to maximize profits. Not to be outdone by this punk, Pfizer, the big pharma powerhouse, has announced plans to abandon America, the nation that has nurtured and sustained its success. CEO Ian Reed says that paying taxes in our homeland puts him and his investors at a, quote, tremendous disadvantage in the global economy. We're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs, he wails. To survive, he claims that Pfizer has to shed its U.S. citizenship and move its corporate domicile to Ireland, a notorious haven for tax dodgers. What Reed doesn't want us common taxpayers to know is that over the last 15 years, Pfizer executives paid $95 billion to buy back shares of the corporation's own stock in order to artificially inflate its price, paid $87 billion in profits to shareholders, with the biggest chunks going to premium owners like Reed himself, spent billions to buy out 3 huge competitors, and then cut the corporate R&D budget and Pfizer's workforce by a third so they could fund all of the above. This is Jim Hightower saying it's not taxes that are hurting American companies, it's executive greed.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Michael Ussery is a Republican and a former political operative. He says the establishment in both parties has to go away. And we say hello to Mike Ussery, former ambassador to Morocco under Presidents Bush and Reagan. He's a veteran of 7 political campaigns, including the 1988 Bush Quayle campaign and the 2000 Bush-Cheney campaign. He also has a successful business career and is a founder of several international businesses and nonprofit organizations. Mike Ussery, thank you so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Thanks so much. It's great to be back.
And nice to have you with us as well. As a businessman and a former diplomat, do you think the art of the deal, as practiced by Donald Trump, is useful in the national security arena?
I do, absolutely. I think negotiation is one of the underdeveloped skills these days by American politicians and diplomats. And I think there are 2 different types, let's say, generally speaking, of negotiating the U.S. does. One is deals for our own very direct interest, and I do believe that Trump's made a case that being a superpower, sometimes we just kind of say, okay, let's let them have this condition, or we don't look at what might happen, particularly when we're dealing with countries that aren't going to be so scrupulous, and they may be looking at a way they can manipulate the deal and twist it and violate it. But in the area where we're trying to be the middle guy, trying to bring together other parties, and so I think we have to be careful about using the art of the deal too literally in all cases. But I do think negotiating skills is one of the great fortes for Donald Trump. I think it's probably one of his strongest assets in this race.
And your opinion, if you will, on the Obama administration deal with Iran to lift sanctions in return for a promise not to develop a nuclear weapon?
Well, I won't ask your audience to listen to my total diatribe about the deal, which I was not happy about. The Iranian economy has been crushed by sanctions, and even now it's been hit harder with lower oil prices. There are just too many loopholes in this deal for us to feel confident that Iran will never go nuclear. And they refuse to give us a lot of information about prior R&D. The 21-day inspection process notification, which can be appealed, to me, that's a joke. So I'm not happy about the structure of the deal. And of course, like many people, everybody knows that for a lot of people, the worst aspect was the immediate funds that went back to Iran and what they might be able to be used for. So I'm no fan of it, but I do think it's a great case, following up on your question about the art of the deal, where we went in looking too hungry for the deal and dealing with some guys who are pretty good in bizarre trading in the bazaar in the marketplace, and I think there were a lot of mistakes made. So we're just going to see over time, but I think within 10, 12 years, I won't be surprised. If not sooner, then we'll be we'll be in some crisis mode with Iran again.
Am I correct in thinking that, so you're okay with them making a deal, just not this deal that they ended up making? Is that fair to say, or would you not have even dealt with Iranians?
No, I can't say I would not have ever sat down at the table. No, trying to make a deal. I don't have a problem with the effort.
Yeah.
With the initiative, with the hopes and aspiration of what a deal could be. It is the particular deal as negotiated that sets poorly with me.
Mm-hmm. The antipathy towards Muslims expressed in Republican primaries, how much does that threaten U.S. diplomatic efforts?
Well, I don't like the way it's been discussed. I don't like some of the positions that have been taken. But at this point, I don't feel like it's hurt us seriously. But yet, it's one of those things that just keeps eating away at the fabric of our foreign policy, and kind of affects everyone. Particularly like those who follow on the internet, the poor in Pakistan and Egypt who are hearing this, and maybe for them it's reinforcing their worst views about American attitudes and biases. So, and it does support the feeling in some that the U.S. is waging a war on Islam, but there does need to be a serious understanding that violent Islamism is a real issue, and it's a threat that's got to be dealt with. So what we need to do is not be out there debating religious grounds, because that's not what ISIS is really about. But there's a need to delegitimize these ideas that are coming out, the propaganda from ISIS, trying to make them less attractive through social growth, economic opportunities, and political dialogue. That part of the challenge is a big one, and it's a long-term challenge. And so, on the road to try to make this kind of change, yes, these kind of comments in the U.S. really make the job tougher for our diplomacy.
We're speaking with Mike Ussery, former ambassador to Morocco under Presidents Bush and Reagan. Mike, how should the United States proceed in general in a world as dark and foreboding as the Republican candidates are painting it?
Well, there's action we need to take, and we should take anyway, regardless of how somebody wants to cast the situation. I mean, we need to strengthen NATO in East Europe. We need to look at putting the missile systems back in the Czech Republic and Poland that we pulled out. And I think we really do have to galvanize our Arab allies to fight ISIS and act as a counterbalance to Iran, which now has more money and to fuel its ambitions. And in fact, in terms of on the ground against ISIS, I want Arab troops there. I don't want American troops trying to find interpreters to walk the streets, find out where the IEDs are, find out where the bad guys went, find out what happened. So we've got a lot to do there. But also in terms of in Asia, we've got to look at the expansionism that's going on over there. We've got to work with South Korea, Japan, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and India. And we also, I'm a believer that free trade helps bolster economic ties between us and our allies, and it supports growth around the world. So let's roll out and finalize the TPP and the US-EU FTA. Those are two major steps in this direction. But anyway, I will just add that, though, we've got it, while we have to encourage our allies, we've got to really show that the U.S. will protect its friends. And there's so much of these psychological calculations going on by those who are against us, or against adversaries. And I think this is just one of the basic steps that, in the end, saves us from a lot of conflict potential and a lot more cost down the road.
Now, obviously, with your background, you might be considered part of the Republican establishment, so you're probably best to tell us why so much of the party has suddenly turned against people like Jeb Bush and John Kasich.
Well, I think there are different answers in different cases. Overall, while I hope, at least I'm not claiming to be part of the Republican establishment at this point in my life, I'll say that the party has certainly, the rank and file certainly turned against Jeb Bush and probably John Kasich. John Kasich more about policies in Ohio in the past few years. Jeb Bush, he really was somebody whose time was another time. It isn't now, and I'm one of the people who personally is against any kind of a semblance of dynasty. The idea that with less than 50 presidents in the U.S., we'd have three from the same family just is appalling to me. So, a lot of things went into it, but underlying everything, there's, the economic argument that Washington has done a great job of talking, but not making change, not functioning. I mean, Washington is really disappointed people, and when you see people that you helped elect stand up in front of just trying to be on the TV cameras all day long, blaming other people but not getting anything done themselves, it's easy to understand why the so-called Republican establishment is detested. And I don't think that's going to change. I think the establishment has to change or go away, and that's the only way we're going to see this end. I don't think this is a one-shot election and then people will vent their anger and go back to things as normal. But how it changes and who gets to lead the change, well, that's what's up for grab the next months.
And it, may invoke one of those "be careful what you wish for" statements too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How important is actual foreign policy experience in selecting a president? I'm not thinking only of the leading Republicans, but Bernie Sanders as well.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, because Bernie Sanders, to my knowledge, has only consulted one particular military advisor in the past several months, and he really has shown foreign policy is not his wheelhouse, but it's also not, I don't think it's one of the top 2 or 3 priorities. It is with really 19 other candidates, so that's an issue. But there's certainly people. I mean, one of the things we've seen here this year, shocking, I wouldn't have predicted a year ago, or that governors haven't been able to break through. And we used to always say, okay, that executive experience is really important. Maybe it's because they don't have foreign policy experience as part of the idea of why they're being pushed down, particularly in the Republican field. But I think foreign policy experience is very, very important. I just think it's very hard to learn on the job. Just as it would be if you didn't know much or anything about the economy and tried to learn how to be the leader of the greatest economy in the world and trade and things like this on the job. I do believe Marco Rubio stands out because of his foreign policy. I think that's his greatest strength, along with his youth. And but I think it's just something that he is so much better in the field than his other competitors. I think that's really great. Jeb Bush, using the old network of his brother, tried to come in and actually talk good talk on foreign policy, but I put it on the list of reasons of one of his weaknesses. He really wasn't a foreign policy guy. He was somebody who was a governor over a decade ago in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mike Ussery, former ambassador to Morocco under Presidents Bush and Reagan, joining us today to talk politics here on americasdemocrats.org. Mike, thank you so much, as always, for your time. It's great speaking with you, and we look forward to doing it again soon.
Well, thanks so much. It's great speaking with you, and I'm hoping this is also the year of the millennials. I want to see them step up, and let's see what they can do over the next decade, starting with this election.
Okay, sounds good. Mike, thanks again. We'll talk soon. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect Stand Up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. And now, Peter Ogburn of The Bill Press Show interviews conservative radio host Michael Graham about the GOP candidates.
Let's talk about the Republicans for a moment with one of their own, conservative talk show host from News Radio 106.7 FM in Atlanta, Georgia. You can read some of his good work at michaelgraham.com. Full disclosure, my very first job in radio was producing for this guy. Ladies and gentlemen, classic American gas bag, Michael Graham joins me live from Atlanta. Hi, Michael.
I want Bill Press to spank me. I want Bill Press to spank me with his book. If I buy the book, will he spank me with it?
That is like isn't that like a total conservative dream, right? Like Bill Press.
If I want it to hurt, do you want it to hurt, Kevin? I want it to hurt. Will he spank me?
How are you, Michael?
So here's first of all, Ogburn, it's always good to talk to you. One of my favorite people on radio. And I was telling people I was going to be on with my old producer Paul Osborne, and I said, I'm hoping that hello, are we there?
Oh, Jesus, God. Yeah.
So here's the deal. What do Jimmy Carter, Bernie Sanders, and Sarah Palin have in common?
What is that?
They all want Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee. How amazing is that? Jimmy Carter said that he'd rather have Donald Trump over Ted Cruz. Bernie Sanders says he just wants Trump to be the nominee, and Sarah Palin, well, who knows what she's saying, because apparently she's always talking to porpoises and seals at all times. I cannot understand. Okay, I don't know. Is that? I mean, I've been to Alaska. Okay, ma'am.
That's how they communicate.
Are you ordering a drink? I don't know what you're doing.
Well, I want to ask you about the Trump overtake of the party, because it was a big social experiment, right? Whether or not Donald Trump could actually deliver votes. And most of the polls showed that he was going to be able to in Iowa. It turns out that wasn't exactly the case. Yeah, right? And I know you are on Twitter at IamMGraham.
That's right.
And you have notoriously sort of been taking shots at Donald Trump. What is it about Donald Trump that drives you crazy, Michael?
Well, I don't know about driving me crazy. It's just, if you're looking for a really bad late-night guy to host a show where they sell you products to make your fat melt away. I mean, I would hire Donald Trump in a heartbeat. Absolutely. If Donald Trump was selling me a skillet, I'd have 5 of them right now, and I would be cooking nothing in them but shoe leather and glue.
They would be wonderful. They'd be wonderful skillets, the best skillets you've owned.
As you know, I am one of those shrinking minority of people, apparently, who actually believes in stuff, like individual liberty and small government and all these principles, and apparently we just abandoned those. I mean, it has been absolutely hilarious to me as a lifelong talk radio fan, and as you know, as bad as a host as I was back when we worked together.
One of the worst I've ever heard.
I'm worse now.
Oh, God.
But I've been a long-time fan. I loved Rush back in the day. I love the fact this guy stood in front of Rush was the Donald Trump of media back in the day, when the media was this conglomerate big thing, and he gave him a middle finger and said, screw you, and he fought for these ideas. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. Entertainment and ideas together. I mean, normally ideas mean Sunday morning boring crap. And so back in the day, I was a Rush fan. But watching Rush and Hannity's Hair and Levin all just totally sell out. I mean, they hoard themselves like a hooker at a Shriners convention. Trump, I just discovered something. I'm not a conservative anymore. I'm a Trumpian. And this is the scary part of a culture that has moved from Judeo-Christian values in the 19th century to capitalism, pseudo-libertarian values in the 20th century to now pure celebrity values. I mean, I have no doubt about it. And Pete, I challenge you, and Bill, who's back on the show, do you have any doubt that one day the President of the United States will be 5-time SmackDown champion, porn superstar, President of America, Mountain Dew Camacho?
Yeah, absolutely.
L.A. star Mountain Dew Camacho is going to be President of the United States.
Yeah.
Because, Trump is the canary. He's the canary in the celebrity culture coal mine. We're not quite there yet, and so he's coughing on the gases because he's a little too deep in the mine. I guarantee you, 2 more election cycles, and it's going to be a Kardashian versus one of Palin's illegitimate kids. I guarantee you that grandkids. I'm sorry, illegitimate grandkids. I guarantee you that's what it's going to be.
That's actually a really smart point, because now you see everybody getting asked. All these celebrities now are being asked, would you ever run for president? Like Mark Cuban has said he's thought about running for president. Right. Kanye West, Will Smith, they all said they're thinking about running for president. And it's no doubt because of the success of a guy like Donald Trump, who has sort of corralled his general popularity into.
But I want to get you to admit something here on the air in front of your listener. Do you concede that Donald Trump is not a conservative and that it is totally bogus for the media to try to make him somehow a poster child of conservatism. You've suffered through enough conservative conversation to know. I want an honest answer from you, Pete.
Here's what I will say. I think that's a fair point, Michael. I don't think he's a conservative. I think he is whatever people need him to be at the time. He's a Trumpian. But at the same time, Republicans and the conservatives have they're sowing the seeds of befriending and making Donald Trump into something over all these years. You remember how Mitt Romney just dropped everything and flew to go and meet with Donald Trump and go in front of the cameras because he could get Donald Trump's endorsement. And at some point, you would think that conservatives, the thought leaders of the conservative movement would say, we really don't need this guy in the fold. We really don't need our candidate for president dropping his campaign and going and kissing the ring of Donald Trump on national television. He's a fringe character, and that's okay. He could be out there. He could be one of those Hollywood Republicans that are hard to find, and actually in our party, Right. And so, this is sort of the chickens coming home to roost. But I think you do make a good point. He's not a conservative in that sense.
And that's why I was so, people who go to michaelgraham.com and see my stuff. I've written a lot for National Review. Right now I'm working with the Weekly Standard. I do their podcast. But I was so proud of my friends at National Review when Trump was in the middle of winning 13 polls in a row. 13 polls in a row said he was going to win. Yeah. They said, we don't care about the polls. We are going to defend these ideas of conservatism from this guy, and they did that issue. I'm not saying the issue had any impact on the election. That's a separate thing. I just am glad that somebody with a media platform in the heart of the conservative world stood up and said, look, you can vote for the guy if you want, but you can't vote for him because he's a conservative.
Yeah.
He doesn't get that. You can vote for him because you're angry. You can vote for him because you think the whole system sucks. I actually think that given the horrific job that President Obama has done, and he will go down in history as one of the 5 worst presidents ever. That's not in debate. The question is, will he be in top 1, 2, or 3? But the horrible damage he's done, not just in policy, not just the failure of Obamacare, not just the failure of his foreign policy, but because of his, he's the first Democrat in power to show the disdain that Democrats have for democracy. You hear it all the time. I hear it on your show when I tune in. The voters are dummies. Look at these rednecks out there clinging to their guns. They're all idiots. The people are too stupid to be allowed to vote. What's wrong with the stupid American people? They're all stupid.
We've never said that. We've never said that. I've maybe said that about Iowans, but not Republicans.
Wait a minute. We can all agree on that. But but seriously, the disdain, you hear it all the time from, for example, the issue of same-sex marriage. The issue of same-sex marriage should have been settled by voting. That's how you change laws. That's how you extend rights, is by voting. We only have 2 rights in America that were extended not by voting: abortion and gay marriage. Every other right is by voting. Democrats don't believe in democracy. They believe in an elitist group to govern us, and Obama showed that elitism. So I don't blame people who know that Obama hates them for saying, you know what, if this is what Washington's going to do, I'm just going to throw in a hand grenade and blow up your whole damn system. And that's what Donald Trump is, that hand grenade.
I take issue with a lot of what you said, but
no, you don't.
But no, I do. Look, I think that they're
scared of you. He knows I'm telling the natural truth.
But I'm going to move on from that, because I do want to talk a little bit about the moving forward for a guy like Donald Trump, right? Because this was this great big social experiment of whether or not all of the exposure of Donald Trump being on TV would translate to votes. And in Iowa, it didn't. And we were saying, well, all these people are saying that they're going to vote for Trump, but will they actually do it? So, now I think that Iowa was a unique case, and it was certainly the first blow for Donald Trump. But beyond that, it's a little easier for people to get that anger vote out moving forward. So New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, I think Trump will do probably very well in those states. But when it gets down to a real slog, how is Trump going to compete with a guy like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, if we're saying it's a 3-man race?
Well, as you know, I was in Boston for 8 years doing talk radio before I came here to Atlanta. So I spent a lot of time in New Hampshire, covered presidential primaries here, et cetera. I think the most interesting thing I've seen, 2 things in the last 24 hours. One is Trump going full whiner. I'm just full Saturday Night Live. That is, when your message is, I'm a winner because I win, no. Now let's say whiner because I whine. That's not good. Second thing is, you see the new national poll that basically has the 3 of them tied. It's like 25, 21, 21, which in the national poll, that's all in the margin of error.
These things move quick, man.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is I just wonder if Trump had the self-discipline to do what he did right after he lost Iowa and be gracious.
Yeah.
And then if he had shown up in New Hampshire and said, look, I know everybody's here to see me bash Ted Cruz, and I'll give you a little bit of that, but I want to make sure that you know these are 3 things I want to do as president. 3 plans. And, by the way, let me just spend 2 minutes explaining my tax plan, which is 4 pages long, which is all you need, right?
Yeah.
And two of that is endorsed ads for my menswear, my casino. I think that would have helped him. I really wonder if the Trump mirage, it's kind of thing you go to the magic show. If you ever see behind the curtain, if you ever see the guy palm the coin, the illusion's done. I just wonder. I'm not predicting that, but put those 2 things together, undermining his own message, and then this huge move in the polls. I don't know. I also say this: actually, Trump, because there's a kind of redneck wing of the party, and I can say that because I grew up in rural South Carolina.
A proud son of Pelean, South Carolina.
Exactly. They like a lot of Trump's animosity.
Yeah.
And I actually think he could do well in the Super Tuesday states. But I wonder what kind of shape he's going to be in when he gets here.
Yeah.
For example, 2 unimpressive wins where it's 23-23-23.
Yeah.
I think people start going, you know what? We're picking a president. Let's pick a president.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And that's, we talk about that a lot. The establishment has always sort of won out. It happened with John McCain. It happened with Mitt Romney.
But let's face it, it's all over because, of course, we all know America is going to elect an elderly woman who can't work a smartphone, who takes $675,000 checks from big companies, and, by the way, puts top secret information in her basement server next to her collection of cat sweaters. We all know America is going to be for her 100%. By the way, I love her defense. I love Hillary's defense. Hey, it's not my fault those idiots sent me top secret stuff to my totally unsecured email.
We actually played the clip from her the debate or the town hall last night where she was trying to defend the money she got.
Right. Well, they offered it to me.
Well, that's what they offered me.
What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, that's not
exactly. It's like when I was at the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
He wanted a big contract in Northern Africa. What was I supposed to do? Turn down the money?
All right. So
actually, you're Secretary of State. What?
We got about 40 seconds left, Michael. How do you see the Republican primary shaking down? How do you see this sort of ending?
I think it's Cruz's to win or lose. In other words, if he can show that he can open the door and be a guy who represents more of the party, I think he can win it. But so far he hasn't done that, and by not doing that, I think the votes shunt off to Rubio. But let's say this, Peter Ogburn, because this is an important day to remember, and I'm tearing up as I say this. No matter what else happens, the one thing we know for sure is I will never have to vote for a freaking Bush again. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Every day that Bush goes out and says, please clap.
Please clap.
Every day, everybody who votes against Bush, an angel gets his wings. I just want you to know that. Every vote against. Oh, it's so glorious. Finally, the horror of the Bush era is over. Hallelujah.
Please clap.
Please clap. There he is, ladies and gentlemen, conservative talk show host at News Radio 106.7 FM in Atlanta, Georgia. My dear friend and classic American gas bag, Michael Graham. Follow him on Twitter at IamMGraham and read his good stuff at michaelgraham.com. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Pete.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Sheila Simon, Michael Ussery, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the show and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate.